Survivors came together from all over Australia to meet in Brisbane with parliamentarians to expose the truths around full decriminalisation. While they were here, we also had the absolute honour of presenting to a room full of people where brave, courageous sex trade survivors shared their hearts, their experiences and their journeys. For most of our survivors, this was their first time standing in front of people, sharing some of their most vulnerable experiences in the sex trade. Sharing one's stories takes a special kind of courage. Opening up to a room full of strangers about experiences that have only ever brought shame, sadness and worthlessness. I was in awe of all of them. Their bravery for stepping up and speaking out was nothing short of inspiring. Gratefully, that room full of strangers embraced the truths and became equipped to fight the battles in their own communities. I start my speech to honour them, to honour their courage and to honour their strength, to honour their passion to be an amplified voice for the voiceless and for the vulnerable, to honour them as the beautiful, strong women that they are. For without survivor voices, testimonials, books and journeys, our fight would be empty. They are the heart of this fight. Them and the thousands of women and children still living in this torture every moment of every day and night. We speak out to prevent anyone from having to live in the torture chamber we have and still at times still do. Because even though we have exited this life, the memories, feelings, emotions still linger around us as if we have been cursed. Speaking out can trigger us back to those times, can cause us to feel the feelings that we felt, can cause us to feel as though we are still there, experiencing the abuse, the torment, the torture and paid rape. It is important that when you hear survivors share their truth, you celebrate them as they sacrifice their own emotional, physical, mental and spiritual health for the freedom of other women and children. In Queensland presently, full decriminalisation is with the Queensland Law Reform Board, and on the 28th day of this month they will give their recommendations to Shannon Fentiman. As survivors, we are asking her to say no to full decriminalisation, say no to further harm to women and children. As survivors' voices gathered in Parliament, they were mostly met with deaf ears, with criticism, judgment and ignorance. As one by one we were told, sorry, there is nothing we can do. This is out of our hands. The responsibility lays purely with Shannon Fentiman. I sat there in this room mostly quiet as I watched them come in one by one, all the while thinking to myself, well, what is the point of having members if all they are puppets? How can this be that our members of Parliament have no say in the cause of effects of harm to women and children? I don't understand it, I didn't then and I still don't. In 2021, Attorney General and Minister for the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence, Shannon Fentiman, said the Queensland Government would make coercive control a crime within the next 4 years and that it was her top priority. This year in 2023, this was made a reality. Shannon Fentiman fights for the rights of domestic violence victims. She prides herself on standing up for vulnerable women and children, even including coercion and a domestic violence bill. So why then is she supportive of a law that will only increase violence against women and children? Why is she so supportive of a law that will only increase more rapes, more murders and more violence? On the 13th of May 2021, a joint statement was made about the $30 million boost to domestic and family violence services across Queensland by the Premier, the Treasurer and Minister for Investment and the Attorney General Shannon Fentiman. They announced that the government was boosting support for victims of domestic, family and sexual violence with extra funding for services across the state. The Premier stated domestic, family and sexual violence is an incredibly complex issue to tackle, but as a government they were tackling it. She goes on to say that this includes changing attitudes and strengthening justice responses, including implementing respectful relationships in schools and establishing specialist domestic and family violence in courts, funding new shelters for people escaping violence and abuse. The Treasurer comments that their commitment will mean victims of domestic and family violence will have better access to support programs that will help them to rebuild their lives. That support involves immediate emergency assistance to provide safety from dangerous situations, but also long-term measures that provide women and children with stability, security, and a safer future. In conclusion, Shannon Fentiman says, "We were taking action to give services a boost with extra funding over 4 years because we know more needs to be done to end violence against women. As a survivor of domestic violence, sexual abuse, exploitation and family violence, I don't understand how women like the Premier and Shannon Fentiman, who publicly state that more needs to be done to end violence against women, who are in their positions, can be so blinded to the harms that full decriminalisation will bring to Queensland, including an increase in violence against women and children. Full decriminalisation feeds sexual violence." The PRA 2003 in New Zealand, otherwise known as full decriminalisation, has not reduced family or domestic violence. The law has not protected vulnerable women and children from harm. In fact, family and domestic violence in New Zealand is at an all-time high and has one of the highest rates internationally. How can women in their positions who attest to being so against sexual and domestic violence against women and children, who pride themselves on being a voice to provide safety from dangerous situations, be so incredibly naive? The survivors that gathered in Brisbane shared their stories, their hearts, their experiences of the truth of prostitution and how it is not work but paid rape. Yet their words fell on deaf ears and did not fall anywhere we needed them to be heard. Shannon Fentiman and the Premier, who are so against violence against women, are about to pass a law that encourages more violence against women and children, that encourages violence to women and children who are being bought and sold for profit. I wonder if they have done their due diligence. I wonder if they are actually fully informed, because it is incredibly hard for me to process how any woman can do this to another woman, let alone children. If we stand to the side and let our voices stay silent, we will set a precedent that women before us who fought for us to live a future free from fear with equality and freedoms, we say to them by staying quiet that their voices, their fight didn't matter. As women, it is up to us to unite together and fight for what is right. It is up to us to show other women that we are important, that we deserve to be free, and that we deserve better. If full decriminalisation is passed, this sends a message to women and children that violence is not okay unless, of course, you pay. That slavery is a job like any other. Full decriminalisation only benefits those who profit from the buying and selling of women and children, and it will increase all forms of violence against women and children. Full decriminalisation discriminates against those who are most vulnerable. However, it does not discriminate when it comes to children. Sex workers will not be safer. In fact, it puts them in more harm's way. Vulnerable women and children deserve to live a life free from fear, torture, violence, and free from slavery. Not just a few, but all. Passing full decriminalisation sends a message to our vulnerable women and children who are trapped in the sex trade that their lives don't matter and can be sacrificed for the few who feel empowered by being bought and sold for sex. At this meeting with members, we left feeling discouraged, disappointed, broken and unheard. The few members who gave us hope were still powerless to create any waves. Gratefully, we have some amazing organisation and community members who did hear us and who have been doing everything in their power, plus more to make sure the voiceless women and children are being heard. One community member even securing a meeting with Shannon Fentiman, Senior Advisor. While there is time, there is still hope. Women through the ages have proven that when we come together to fight a common cause, we are a force stronger than any man, any government, and any politician. So rise up, get disruptive, and shake the rooftops as the women before us. So I ask each of you to write a late submission to the Queensland Law Reform Board against full decriminalisation and for the Nordic model, a law that will decriminalise women and recognises that they are women and children who have few to no choices, while providing funding for those who wish to exit and create new lives. Nordic model holds the buyers and those who profit from women and children with few to no choices accountable and sets a precedent that the buying and women and children for sex is just not okay. It may just be that your letter that hits the right nerve, that creates that seed of doubt, that creates change. Everyone is waiting for someone to go first. Be that brave, loud, disruptive woman or man in your community that leads the way. When they silence us, they enslave us. And in the words of Emmeline Pankhurst, I would rather be a rebel than a slave.